we're going to keep suffering. We can only get out of the suffering loop once we understand it. What it takes to get the courage, I would say, to get out of it. That's what we want to discuss a little bit here today. If you go back to the basic books of Spiritism, you're going to find in one of the books, The Gospel According to Spiritism, there's an entire chapter, a full-blown entire chapter, chapter 5, which Allan Kardec named Blessed Are the Afflicted. We're not going to really go through the chapter. That's not the purpose of tonight, but we're going to use the whole concept of it and discuss some ideas here. But that tells us how much this is important for us. It's one entire chapter in one of the major books of Spiritism. If you look at the title, Blessed Are the Afflicted, it's kind of, it leaves us in a kind of, it's puzzling. Because if you go to the dictionary and you look at blessed, it means something like this. This is the Merriam-Webster dictionary, having a sacred nature. So it has to do with divinity somehow, right? Connected with God. Whatever kind of belief system you have, it's something that has to do with divinity. On the other hand, on the same phrase, we have afflicted. We go back to Merriam-Webster and we look up afflict, and it says to cause pain or suffering to something or somebody or someone. And it's kind of conflicting, because how can something that is connected to divinity cause suffering? So it's something that we need to understand. That's maybe the challenging point here is, what does it mean exactly? And we can only understand that by digging into what suffering is, what affliction is, and taking some conclusion out of it. So let's put some reflection here. This is a timeline. Let's just put this timeline on the screen here. And this is us right here, right now, in this room. That's the now moment. Obviously, when I put a now moment, I divided something in the past and future, obviously, because that's the nature of our incarnate life. So if we think about suffering, there is no suffering now, because nobody suffers now. If we are suffering now to our standards, it means something happened in the past. That's why I'm suffering now. It could be 1 second ago, but it is in the past. It could be 3 days ago. It could be 5 years ago. So it drives us back to the past somehow. It could be something in childhood, something in the teen years, something that, it's not being resolved or not being understood, and it brings us this suffering, and we think we're suffering now. We're not suffering now. This is just a consequence of something that happened, and it has not been resolved. The thing is, this original fact or original event that took place not necessarily belongs to this lifetime. It can go back many, many, many lifetimes. If it's within this lifetime, this lifetime, it's kind of relatively easy to find out. It could be something that, when I was a kid, I was afraid of water because I fell into the pool and I thought I was going to die. So from that day on, you grow up and you're always afraid of water. So you kind of relate to that because, my mother told me about this and this. But some of these things, we don't have a clue at all. You can be afraid of water, so you look at water and you just feel bad. You want to get away from it. And apparently there's no explanation. You go back to your parents, you ask them, did I have any issue? Did I have any major event related to water? They'll say, no, not at all. So it kind of puzzles us. We don't know what it is because it could be one of these things that comes from the past. So every time, in our example, every time I see water, I get close to the sea, I get close to a pool, I'm suffering. I'm suffering. Inside myself, I'm like, oh my God, I want to get out of here. I want to be away from this thing. And it's not really something that's happening at the moment. The water is there, static and doing its thing. It's not doing anything to me. But I'm fishing. I'm just going to my past and I'm just fishing events and bringing them to the point that I am right now. And I'm reliving those things. If I don't stop fishing, I'm not going to stop suffering. But that's not even the worst. The worst is, what is my future made of what I do now? If what I do now is suffer because of the past, what is my future like? Suffer about the same thing. And again and again and again. And if I don't stop the loop, I'm always going to be here. I'm gonna waste my lifetime. This one, the next one, the next one, the next one, because I'm not making anything out of it. I'm just suffering because I'm fishing. I go to the past and I bring the same things all over again, and I kind of suffer, or I think I'm suffering in this moment. If I'm suffering now, that's what my future is going to be. So it's something that comes from the past. It passes over the now moment, and it goes over to our future, and we just accept that. We just take that for, yeah, that's the way it is. Not necessarily. We all have free will. We can stop this. So we want to investigate a little bit these afflictions. They are nothing more than echoes of past actions. We don't suffer now. We are reliving something that we already lived. Okay? Suffering has several different levels. We can suffer physical pain, for example. If I hit my arm here, it's gonna hurt. I'm gonna go to the doctor, he's gonna put a cream in here and I'm all set. And that's easy because I can tell the doctor exactly where the pain is because I know it. I feel and I can tell him I hit the wall or I hit the table or whatever, and this is the problem point per se. Now sometimes we go to the doctor and he's gonna ask us, what do you have? And you're gonna say, well, I don't feel well. And he's going to say, what exactly are you feeling? And you will tell something like this, well, it's here. It's in this area. And he's going to ask you, but where exactly so I can help? And you can't really tell, no, I don't know exactly. It's in this area. So it went from a punctual thing to an area. And sometimes we go to the doctor and we tell him we're not feeling well. What do you have? I don't know. I don't know how to explain. I'm just not feeling well. So it's everywhere at the same time. We can't pinpoint. It's not coming from my head. It's not a headache. It's not my feet. It's not my stomach. It's just generalized. That's the kind of suffering that we're talking about because this is the moral suffering. It is in the perispirit. If it is in the perispirit, I can't pinpoint symptoms. I can't relate symptoms to a part of the body. It's the whole thing. When we get to this, I'm not feeling well. Some days we wake up and we're just not feeling well per se. It has to do something with past actions, past something that we did, and we are, for some reason, reliving that moment. It might have been a dream that we had and triggered something, but it is something that comes from the past. Now, why do we suffer? We suffer because of this, because we are going against the laws of God. What does it mean? Well, think about today's society, for example, which is very easy for us to relate because we live in a society, a very challenging society because it has too many different things happening at the same time. But think about this. If you go back in time, we were brought a set of moral values. For us, they came from Moses when he brings us the 10 Commandments. So don't kill and so and so. So let's pick, for example, don't kill. So he brings a set of moral values. He comes down the mountain. He presents those things. And people complain. They say, well, why can't I kill if I just killed people this morning? I've always done that. Why should I avoid doing this from now on? It's kind of challenging to make people understand that. 4,000 years ago, we're not in a position to understand that. So he had to impose on us these moral values. And he brought, in order to make it happen, he brought what we call today social laws. So for example, moral value, don't kill. Social law, don't kill. If you kill, you're going to go to jail, for example. So if you kill, you're going to go to jail is not a moral value. It doesn't come from God. It's us trying to help each other by forcing, in quotes, each one of us to follow it. Okay, so it's a social law. Because of the social laws, we go into a different behavior. So for example, I'm talking to somebody here, and the thing gets heated, and then more heated, more heated. In the past, the easy thing to do would be to get my sword and just put through him. It was the easy thing to do, the obvious thing to do, per se, 4,000 years ago. Today, I'm going to say, hold on, I can't pull the trigger. Because if I do this, if I do that behavior, I'm going to be under a social law that's going to put me in jail because it reports back to a moral value. So our moral values drive our behavior. That's what it should be. But what happens when, because of selfishness and different things, we go the other way around? For example, we have behaviors today that are very strange. For example, don't kill, right? Starting with the don't kill. So let's say somebody kills somebody else. And that somebody is an important person in the society, in the country, whatever it is. So when it's time for the society to make a judgment about the fact, we come out with an alternative solution, which is, well, okay, it's your first crime, so we're not gonna do anything to you. So now it became a problem because it becomes a general behavior. I feel the same way. I can do the same thing, and each one of us in that society will feel the right to act the same way. So now we all have a different behavior. Before we couldn't kill, we wouldn't kill. Now we can if it's the first time. It's not really a problem because we adjusted the laws and created moral values for the society. They're not really moral, but they are pseudo-moral values. So our society today goes by the behavior instead of the behavior going by the moral values. That's why it's so complicated out there. And so every time we go up this way, we are going against the law. When we go against the law is going to hit us. There's going to be a point where I'm going to suffer because I'm just going to hit the mountain and I can't pass it. That's when we suffer. So we suffer because we think our behavior is right and we modify everybody else. We modify the world. We modify the laws. We propose changes to make it easier for us to be the way we are and so on and so on. So instead of us changing to comply with the moral values. I don't know if you understand this, but that's very important to understand. Our society, almost all of our society, goes by this. And it becomes very complicated. So we have shootings everywhere. We have people killing people everywhere. We have shootings in the malls. It's becoming a standard. If you open the news, if you read the news every day or every couple of days, it's like this. Where was the shooting yesterday? It's almost certain there was a shooting yesterday. That's the behavior. So it's getting difficult. Now, why do we get into all of this? It all begins in ourselves, okay? Life after life after life, as we go along, we are not happy with things. We are dissatisfied. We go through trials. We are in trials and expiations. We don't like them. We don't think we deserve to go through them. She gets this and I don't get that. He gets the car, I don't have it. He is the president of the company, I'm not. All these things puts us in a position of dissatisfaction slash questioning about it. There's a point where we take one of the two following roads, and there's only two. Okay, one of them is the green road, avenue of the responsibility. When I go down the avenue, when I go up the avenue of responsibility, I'm going to look at myself and all these things here in the past, and this critical moment here, when I make that decision, I say, okay, let me list everything. Let me understand who I am. Give me everything that I'm not doing right. Bring it to me right here, and I'm going to be responsible to work on these things. So bring them to me. Bring it all over here. It's going to be difficult. Yeah, it's going to be difficult, but bring them to me. I'm responsible for these things. Put them on my desk, and I'm going to work on them. And then I'm going to reanalyze all my choices, all the things that I've been doing now and in the past, and it's what I call moral refinement. It's an opportunity that I'm given once I decide to take the avenue of responsibility. Now I can take another road. There's another choice, which is the road of the victimization. The road of the victimization is dangerous. It's a never-ending, no exit road. When you go down that way, when I go down that way, things like this are going to happen. Well, my life is not good, I don't have this, I don't have that, everything is wrong, I think I deserve this, and it's all because of you. It's all because of him. It's all because of her. I didn't do anything. You guys put me in this situation, so it's your fault. Now, go for a little bit more. If it's your fault, when is it going to end? It's going to end when you undo what you did. Simple answer, right? So I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for you to undo what you did that put me in this position that I think I am. And nothing is going to happen. Because sometimes you don't even know you did something that puts me in that situation. So the problem with the road of victimization is I'm going to blame it all on everybody else except me. I'm the right one, and everybody else is wrong. You all put me in this situation. You got to do something about it. You have to do something about it, not me. Don't come to me. I don't touch anything because I didn't do anything wrong. And this is the problem. I'm going to revolt because you're not doing anything. Time is passing. You're not doing anything. I'm still suffering. You're not doing anything, and I'm still suffering. There's going to be a point where I can't take that anymore, and that's the point where I call moral implosion. When I get to that point, it's very easy to understand why people take a gun, okay, they go to school and shoot everybody. It's called moral implosion. I can't take myself anymore. That's it. That's it. I imploded. So I'm going to kill everybody because you're all guilty. You put me in this situation, I'm going to offset all of this situation. So this is why it's so dangerous going the victimization road, because if I feel like I'm a victim and it's all your fault, I need somebody to save me. I need a savior. I can't save myself. If I can't save myself, I'm here. That's myself, me, myself. That's here. Here, I need to wait for a savior. And that savior might never come. And he will never come. And I'm going to stay all the way down to the last drop of water, to the bottom of the sea, waiting for that to take place. It's not going to take place. So it's a choice. It's still a choice. We all got free will. So I can take this road or I can take this. We just need to understand what the consequences are. So if we're here, we're not getting anywhere, we're blaming people for this and that, and so on and so on. So we better take another road. We better shift our ways and do something different. And Allan Kardec is going to discuss this situation, the victimization and guilt and all of that, in a series of questions throughout the books, not only in the Spirit's book. He talks about, even in the Medium's book, he addresses that a little bit. But let's take some of these things. We're doing some reflections on the topic. Let's take some of the things on the Spirit's book and let's see what they say. Allan Kardec asks the spirits, what determines the duration of the suffering? That's nice, because I want to know how much longer I'm going to suffer. I can't take this anymore, but I want to know if it's another 10 minutes or maybe 3 years, and then I'll deal with that. So tell me how long I'm going to suffer. Okay? And here's the answer. The length of time required for the improvement, that's the time it takes. If the time that it takes requires improvement, he is not talking, the spirits, they are not talking about victimization. They're talking about responsibility. The improvement will not come from a victim. The improvement comes from a responsible person that's going to work on their stuff, on her stuff. And they keep going. Since the state of suffering or happiness, the two extremes, is in proportion to the degree of purification of the spirit, the duration depends on the time that it takes to improve itself. It is my decision. One day I'm going to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to get better. I'm just going to get better. That's the day where I shift gears, 90 degrees from victimization to responsibility. If I never do that, I'm going to keep going down the road of victimization. It's going to be snowball. Life after life after life. If we don't stop the snowball, we're going to get into moral implosion. It's going to be very complicated, much more than it is now. Another question that Allan Kardec asks the spirits. Is incarnation necessary for the spirits, even those who are following the right road? Because we know we reincarnate to get rid of bad things, and so to improve. That's evolution. So he's asking, even people who are on the responsibility road, why do they have to incarnate? And the answer is, well, they still have to, because they still have things to be worked on. It's just a lot more quickly. If you go down the victimization road, it's going to take a long time, because I need to first realize I'm on the wrong road. I'm not going to the right place, and I have to come back and then go to the right place. These people are already on the right road. So it's going to take, do they have to go through it? Yes, they have to go through it, but it's going to take a lot less than it takes me or those suffering. That's a general reflection on the subject. Now let's talk about two things. First, undergoing afflictions. What is it being afflicted? What is it suffering like that? And second, how do I overcome that? Which is probably the good part. I wouldn't say that undergoing is much better than overcoming, but we need to understand. And we're going to look at this under these 5 points here. First, action and reaction, and that we know from Spiritism. Look at this by Emmanuel. Those who hurt others definitely don't know what they're doing because they ignore the law of cause and effect. If I'm making somebody suffer now, I'm going to have to deal with that down the road. That's going to be the road of victimization. Responsible people don't do this. They don't do anything bad to anybody else. In a way, we heard that before, where Jesus says, whoever was killed by the sword shall perish by it. So it's up to us. It's a decision. I can keep making people suffer. I can continue making people unhappy because of my attitudes, my behavior. Yes, I can do that, but it's going to be difficult. I know what's coming ahead. Okay, second angle of understanding the problem, repeating mistakes. Let's look at this, for example. This is a very known event in our history where Barabbas is Pontius Pilate, okay, receives Jesus as a criminal. So Jesus is taken to him as a criminal. He's supposed to make a judgment and let him go or not. And he's kind of, well, we know that from Scripture. He goes like, this guy is not really a criminal. He didn't do anything wrong, but I'm under pressure. I need to get by. I need to maintain my position, my political figure, my political position. I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to try to adjust things. You see, he's working for himself, not for anybody else. So he has this, quote, brilliant idea of bringing somebody else that was a real criminal and then present both to the public, and the public is going to make a judgment. And obviously, quote, Pontius Pilate think that Jesus is going to be free. Well, it didn't go that way. So now he created another problem. Instead of him taking responsibility, he goes, well, I'm just a victim here. I'm washing my hands. I'm just a victim. You chose, you're responsible for it. That's exactly what he did. And we know how it turns out. Now, this is one event in our history 2,000 years ago. Now, who made that history? Who made the history of humanity? We did. We all did. So we might not be one of these three people, maybe not even those in the audience on those days, but we do this every day in our lives. I'm not going to say every day, but at least every week. Every time we have to make a choice, and this is the right thing, and this is the wrong, and knowingly I make the wrong choice, my name is Pontius Pilate. I'm signing off as Pontius Pilate. And how many times we do this in a year, in a week? A lot. I know this is right, I know that is wrong, and I'm signing off on this one here, the wrong one. And I don't want to suffer. I'm going straight against the law. That's my choice. I'm going to have to deal with that. That's one example in our history, but when I bring that history into my own personal history, that kind of changes everything. That has a different weight now. When I look at this from here, it's 2,000 years ago. That's part of the past. Well, not really. It has a weight on my own personal life now, today. Here's another event in our history when we go Pope Urban II, Pope, the guy who is supposed to promote Christianity and, talk about good things and lead the population towards the good causes and everything. He's the one that commissions every single Christian to go to Jerusalem to kill all the Muslims, all of them. Don't leave one standing up. That's a Pope. So we go and we present a Jesus that bear arms to another belief system. Now, bring this to your own personal history. Every time, do we do this today? Do we do this today in 2015? Do we tell people to go against other people? Do we talk bad about somebody else? We do. So every time I talk bad about somebody else and this person, no, you should do this and that person. Every time I do this, I'm signing off as Pope Urban II, because I'm doing that. I'm doing a crusade, a personal crusade, on a small scale, but it's my own world, and I'm going to have to deal with that later, and I don't want to suffer. Here's another one, Inquisition. What is the Inquisition? The Inquisition is, there's a certain faith that everybody in the power thinks that everybody else should follow, and they will make it happen by force. What kind of force is that? Well, this is what you should do. If you don't do it, you're going to burn. You're going to be put to burn. And we did this for over 500 years. And then you go like, well, that's history. That's way in the past. Well, bring this into your personal history. Do we do this today? There's a phrase in English language in this country that I think defines this in our personal history. It's like this. It's my way or no way. You do what I say, or you're going to see what happens to you. That's this. That's when I sign off as the Great Inquisitor. And that's my name. Every time I do this, the Great Inquisitor. So we can go on and on and on. I'm just going to bring one more. This ugly thing here. This ugly event in our history. You see, when he started to do what later became what it became, he didn't really want to, he didn't have any idea of how far this would go. He went too far. He didn't plan on, yeah, we're going to do this. Not really. He started small, but things got lost. We lost track of it. He lost control. So let's bring this event to my personal history. So here I am. And I'm going to say, this is my best friend. And I'm going to tell him something bad about my best friend. You know this guy here? He does that. And this, oh, you should be away from me. You don't even know this guy is... Get away from him. They don't know each other. But he talks to her. He tells him, which tells her, which tells him. And now here I am, me and my best friend. And what do? And I don't want to suffer. How come? Every time I talk bad about somebody and I have no clue and no idea of the consequences, and I never do, my name is Hitler. I'm signing off as Hitler, possibly, potentially. And we just talk bad about, yeah, that person. And I don't want to suffer. So you see how easy it is to buy suffering? How easy it is to buy affliction? It doesn't take too much, right? Why is our history that way? Because this is each one of us doing the same thing. We did number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and a lot more. We're not going to talk about it. So you see the weight that these 4 things, only 4 out of our history, the weight that this has on my personal life should matter to me. We need to rethink a lot of things. We need to take a fresh look at a lot of things. Otherwise, we're just going to do this, feed sufferings. We keep feeding our sufferings. Instead of breaking suffering and getting away from it and trying to move away from it, we just keep feeding. Here's one of them, attached to material goods. Okay, we know, everybody knows, right? If you look into, if you take all belief systems, all of them, belief systems are not religion. Okay, materialism is a belief system. Okay, atheism is a belief system. It's not religion. It's a lot more than religion. If you take all belief systems, there's only one thing in common that all belief systems believe. There's only one thing, which is, when you die, you don't take anything physical with you. When you die, the car is still in the garage. The computer is still on the desk. The iPhone is still on the desk. We don't take anything physical. Everyone in any belief system knows that. But we act like it was, well, it's going to be different for me. And we dive into the material world and just go into it, doing things that don't make any sense because we think it's going to be different this time. And we don't want to suffer. Here's another one. We desire, very much a lot of us do, in more or less intensity, unfortunately, we desire to control someone else's life. The problem with controlling someone else's life is not controlling someone else's life, it's forgetting to control my own life. When my focus is on somebody else's life that I want to control, I don't want to let them have this because that belongs to me and so and so and so, what am I doing? I'm forgetting to work on my sufferings, on my afflictions. If I forget to do that, it's going to keep going. I'm just going to go downhill on the road of victimization. And when we follow that road, we face this. A lot of times, this is our complaint, justice. Nothing is just. I should have this, not him. I should have this, not her. And this is not just. Should be my way, not her way, not his way. And we do this because of a lack of understanding. We do this by human standards. What is the human standard? It's the one that comes, again, from behavior to moral values, not from moral values to behavior. So for us, justice is based on revenge. You did this, yeah, you see what's going to happen to you. I'm going to do this to you. Divine justice doesn't have anything like this. Each one has its own thing. Each one has its own path. Each one its own way to get things done properly, to revise their life. They all have the same opportunities. For human justice, the law can be adjusted. I can adjust the law to my needs. Like I said in the beginning, nobody can kill. But one day somebody killed and they said, man, we're going to make a small change in the law. The first crime, you're forbidden. You're forgiven. Right? So divine law can't take anything like this. Divine law is based on equality and opportunity. You go back and you work on it to offset whatever you did. And human justice is not universal. And divine justice is. What does it mean? For example, if you go back, let's say, 300 years ago, for example, in England, if you steal, they would cut your hand. That was in England 300 years ago. Is it still valid today? No, so it's not universal. It depends on time and space. All right? We had slaves. 500 years ago, it would be a nice conversation to talk about, well, I have 20 slaves. Oh, I'm better than you, I have 50. Regular conversation. Can we see that today here? We don't. So that law, that you can have slaves and treat them like we treated in the past, that's not universal. That's dependent on time and space. So our laws are not universal. We make them for us now. We don't make them for a group of people and looking into a span of lives and events. Okay? So we complain. We complain because we're coming from behavior to moral values. We're going against the law. And then there's something called willpower that I was saying here. The free will, the willpower. Allan Kardec is going to talk about that too when he's studying afflictions and sufferings. And he's going to ask this to the spirits. This is very interesting. Could humans always overcome their evil tendencies through their own efforts? For us to understand the question, the answer, we need to first understand the question. Let's go back to the question slowly. Could humans always overcome their evil tendencies through their own efforts? Is this responsibility or victimization? Responsibility. So this question eliminates all of those that decided to take the victimization road. It does not apply to them. It does not apply to them. Okay, so here's the question. The answer is yes. So those who are in the responsibility avenue that decided to do something with their lives and shake things up and get it done for good, for those, yes, it is, can always overcome. Yes, they can overcome. And look at this, sometimes with very little effort. And then I panic. I said, wow, very little effort to stop suffering and revamp everything and start everything fresh. And then I look at this and I said, well, obviously it's a translation problem because this came in French. Right? The original text is French. And I said, well, it's a translation problem. That can't be right, very little effort. So I said, I'm going to look at different translations. So on this particular translation, which is the latest by Darrell Kimball, very little effort. Here's another translation by Anna Blackwell, English-British translation in the late 1800s, a very slight effort. It's not the same 3 words, but it's the same thing, meaning, basically, right? And I said, it can't be right. Let me take another translation. So I go to Mr. Bonfan, and here it is, very small efforts. And I go like, you know what? Why should I go to translations? Why don't I just go to the original? These people don't know how to translate. Why don't I just go to the original? Yeah, so let's go to the original. Let's look at it. And the original says, originally in French, it says, "De fables est forte." Well, what is fable? Fable is weak, slight, poor, superficial. So now I'm in trouble, because when the translation is wrong, I'm in victimization. When the translation is not wrong, it's responsibility. Yeah, that was a bad translation. Let's go to the next question. That's victimization. Can I do that? As many times as I want. I can do that for all 1,019 questions in the Spirit book. Free will. Willpower. We're talking about willpower. It's my choice. Now, when I look at this and I go, wow, hold on. Hold on, that's a whole different story. I better shift gears here, because I'm going down the victimization mode. So you start seeing the difference, why we so easily devote our own lives to suffering. It's so easy to do that. It's incredible. But we just let it go. We don't try to break the ties with sufferings, and we just go hand by hand, hand in hand. Overcoming afflictions. Is there a way to get out of it? That would be nice, right? Well, let's look at 5 angles here. Knowledge. We already know that. Knowledge is everything. For us, knowledge was brought in 3 times of humanity history. The first time was when Moses brings in the 10 Commandments, like I said before. Can you imagine Moses coming down the hill and say, people, I got these 10 things here. Let's all sit together and discuss this. People 4,000 years ago in the level of evolution they were, today it wouldn't work. Can you imagine 4,000 years ago? So he couldn't do that. He had to impose these things. This is what it is, and period. Shut up. This is what it is. So the first revelation brings this overall tone of imposition, because it just had to be that way. Then a second revelation, when Jesus incarnates, takes a different tone. Jesus never imposed anything on anybody. He never threaten anybody. He never did anything like this. He was a counselor. He goes to a woman that commits adultery and he says, listen, calm down. I wouldn't do this again if I were you. I would take a different road. That's counseling. You know, I don't blame it. I don't blame you. But just don't do this again, because I don't think you should do. That's counseling. So he's here to change the tone from imposition to counseling, because 100 years later, 1,400 years later, we are in a better position to listen to a counselor. We had to listen to a dictator before, in modern 2015 words. But now, here, we are in a better position to listen to a counselor. But then, later on, 1,900 years later, we have something different. We have a third revelation that takes to a whole different level and brings us the explanation. You see, here, we're going to hear things like, don't kill. And we're going to just argue. Hey, Moses, what do you mean? What is it? What is that? I just killed somebody this morning, and now I can't kill. What is it? It doesn't make sense. So here, don't kill is one thing. Here, don't kill is another thing. Now I know why. Here, I'm being told not to. And here, I'm being told exactly why in deep details. That changes the tone completely. So we need to, when we go by these standards here, and we start to look into the explanation of everything, you know, that's when logic comes in. And that logic starts with our knowledge, and our logic starts right here with the Spirit's book. You see this phrase right here? Right? Logic is part of it. And the Spirit's book is actually a set of 4 books or 4 parts, and these are the 4 parts. And what's interesting is the fourth part, the third and fourth part, they're all completely detailed in another book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, in which, in the beginning, we mentioned chapter 5 is about sufferings, afflictions, and so blessed are the afflicted. But there's another book in Spiritism that brings a lot of information about the topic. The topic today, sufferings and afflictions, which is Heaven and Hell. It's a nice book. It's a 2-part book. The first part, he goes a lot through some aspects of Spiritism, and the second part, he transcribes, literally everything, transcribes mediumistic sessions with different spirits, and he classifies it. It's all categorized. Spirits that were suffering, that were good, that were this, that were that. It's very interesting. When you look at the spirits that were suffering and the transcripts of those sections, we start to be a lot more concerned. That's a lot of material to read about the topic, but that's what we all should do. And here's another angle, abnegation. Lacordaire, who has 3 messages in the Gospel according to Spiritism, is going to tell us that we all suffer, but suffer well. What is suffer well? Well, suffer well has nothing to do with intensity. You can suffer in 2 ways, in quantity or in quality. Suffering in quantity is, I'm suffering more today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today. In quantity, my quantity of suffering, my amount of suffering is getting higher and higher. That's a snowball. That's because I'm going down the victimization road. If I go down that road, I suffer in quantity, but I can suffer in quality, in which we're still going to suffer, and we're going to say, wow, oh my, that was intense. That was something. What is wrong here? What do I take home? What do I take out? What do I make out of this thing? That's suffer in quality. That is what Lacordaire is saying here. Suffer well. Look into why you're suffering. Make something out of it. Don't just practice human justice, because it's not going to work. Afflictions are mechanisms of moral progress. We all need to go through that. That's how we are shaken up. Just let's get this thing done once and for all. Here's another angle to look at things, choices. We all make choices. And there's something that's called duality. And I usually say this, the physical plan is dualist by design. What is all of this? Think about this. Let's say something like honesty. So you have the 2 possibilities, honesty and dishonesty. And I've mentioned this before here. So let's just say, for example, that I was very dishonest in the very past, several lives ago, and I'm getting better and better and better. And last life, I almost got it done. And then I decided my next life, which is the present, I'm not going to steal anything. I'm going to be 100% honest. And from this on, dishonesty is going to be out of question. So I come here and I incarnate here. Okay? And then everything goes well. And then suddenly, somebody leaves $1,001 bills here, and everybody leaves the room. And I go like, wow, my God. And I got all agitated, and I sweat, and I want to take, if I take 20 bills, nobody's going to notice. It's a pile of 1,000. Nobody's here, nobody's watching. If I thought about this, if that was my attitude, I have not yet transcended the duality, honesty, dishonesty. Dishonesty is still a possibility. Even if I decide not to steal the 20 bills, but it's still a possibility. I got agitated. I suffered in that moment because all dualities bring affliction. I have to deal with them. And again, I know which one is right and which one is wrong. And I might sign off as Pontius Pilate. It's all my choice. Okay? So we are here to learn things. We are here to clear off dualities. That's why I say the physical plane is dualist by design. We have to be confronted all the time with the 2 possibilities to learn how to make the right choices. And here's another one, alcoholism and sobriety. So let's say in the very, very past, many lives ago, I was a heavy drinker, and then it gets better and better and better and better. And this life, I said, I'm going to go there, I'm not going to drink anything, and from that lifetime on, I'm not going to drink ever again. And this is going to be my incarnation to fix that problem. And here I am. Everything is going well and then I go to a party, somebody puts right here the most expensive and desired whiskey on the planet. And I go like, oh my God, if I had just 2 drops, oh my God, it would be nice, it would be sensational, that's the whiskey. If I'm acting like this, I have not yet transcended the duality, alcoholism, sobriety, because alcoholism is still a possibility. The day I clear off, it's going to be different. In the case of honesty and the money, the day that I transcend that duality, I'm going to look at the pile of bills and I'm going to put my 2 hands on my head and I'm going to say, oh my God, somebody forgot $1,000 here. They should be desperate. Let me look for him. And I'm going to ask you to help me find that person. On that day, I have transcended the duality, dishonesty, honesty. Same with the alcohol. The day that I see the alcohol, the most expensive, most desirable alcohol in the whiskey in the planet, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to say, oh my God, this is trouble, because I have some friends here that if they see this, it's going to be a disaster. So let me just put this away. The day that I do this, I have transcended the duality, alcoholism, sobriety. And that goes for all dualities. So all of them are based on free will. It's my choice. It's what I do with my life here. I'm here in trials in a trials and expiations condition. I have to be presented all the time with both possibilities to learn how to make the right choices and not to learn again and again and again how to sign off as Pontius Pilate, because that I've done a million times. So it's my opportunity to work on my free will. Now the thing is, every duality brings a conflict, because I could do this, but I can't. I should be doing this, but I want to do that. So every time I'm in conflict, I'm going against the law. I'm going through one of these dualities. Okay? And that goes not only for honesty, dishonesty, alcoholism, sobriety. It goes for all vices versus all virtues. It's everything. And again, it's our choice. And how do I get out of this thing? What is my new direction? How do I get out of this thing? You see, we need to understand one thing. When I transcend these dualities, okay, let's say, for example, honesty and dishonesty. The day that I clear off that one, the day that dishonesty is no longer a possibility, this is no longer a duality, because this one is done. This is no longer a duality now, okay? This is called truth. There's only one truth. That's only one part of it. That's the truth. Honesty is the truth. Sobriety is the truth, and so and so and so. And then we go back and we listen to somebody saying, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Free from what? From the conflict of having dualities and suffering. Because the day that I clear off dualities, the conflict goes away. I don't suffer for that anymore. I don't suffer with, you can put a pile of money this high here. Somebody left the money here. Oh, look at that. A pile of bills. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to try to take any advantage of that. So there's going to be a point where everything becomes truth. We start clearing off one by one, duality after duality. And one thing that I usually use to explain people, it's easier for us to deal with material stuff than intangible stuff. So I use the sun, which is still material because we look and see, we don't put our hands on it, but we still look and see. It's something that we easily relate to in the material world. And think about this. Look at the sun. Okay? If you look at the sun, I'm going to ask you this. When is it dark at the sun? It's dark here at 6 p.m. When is it dark at the sun? Never. Why not? The never we know, but the why not, we need to think about it. Why not? We know it's never, but it's hard to explain, right? All right, here's an answer. Here's the answer. Because the sun is the source of all light, not some light, all. The sun is the source of all light. Well, what does it apply to me? Yeah? When am I going to be in peace? When I am the source of all peace. When am I going to be tolerant? When I am the source of all tolerance. When am I going to be patient? When I am the source of all patience. So when we ask people, when are you going to be in peace? You see, it's not when two men in suit and nice outfit and sign off a piece of paper or two pieces of paper somewhere in an office somewhere. That's not when we are in peace, because they leave that room. When they get back to their desks, they are in conflict again and they're fighting again with somebody else, and that even doesn't affect us. We are not in peace when two people sign something, because that's victimization. When you do what you have to do, I'm going to be in peace. So you, Mr. President A, and you, Mr. President B, please go ahead and sign the thing. Okay, it's signed. And it didn't change anything because it doesn't relate to me. I'm in victimization, I'm waiting for the Savior. Those two were not the Saviors. I'm going to wait for another one. And wait and wait and wait. So when you see the Son as the source of all virtues, that's when we start clearing off all the dualities. When I work on sobriety and alcoholism and I clear that off, then it's no longer a vice and a virtue. It's just truth. And then it goes like that. So the idea of the Son, you know, it brings a new idea of how we can change things. We need to be the source of it. We can't expect people to be the source of anything to make it better for us. Okay? And lastly, another way to look at overcoming afflictions. It has to do with the mind and the brain. Okay, science has been fantastic in all the advances, especially in the last 20 years. And we have something now called neuroscience or neurosciences. This is very interesting. This explains a lot what we should do at the physical level, at the incarnate level per se, how we get rid of afflictions and sufferings. So let's go through this a little bit. What is neuroscience? In the past, we would study the brain. Biology would study the brain. And we would study with technology. We would see certain things in the brain, but we wouldn't relate to what biology was saying. We would go to a psychologist. He would say something else about the mind and the brain. So we had a bunch of diverse pieces, scattered pieces that didn't relate to each other in a understandable way. Until we find a way to take all these sciences, quantum physics and a bunch of different things, we put them all in the blender, turn the blender on. When the blender stops, we got something called neurosciences. So neuroscience is a combination of different things that study the physical activity in the brain. That's what it is. It's a scientific study of the brain. When we started studying these things, and especially in the last, I would say 10 to 15 years, it became very interesting. This is a basic machine used by the studies of neuroscience. It's called a PET scan, a brain scanner. I don't know if you ever saw something like this, but it's becoming so popular. We see this in the news, on the internet. That image is becoming very popular. And what this is you put somebody in this equipment, you move them all the way in. So the brain is being scanned. But it's a dynamic scan. What we know today is, before we put this guy in the machine, what we know is there are certain areas of the brain that represent some things. For example, if there's activity in the back of the brain, it means the guy is looking at something with their eyes. If there's activity in this part of the brain, he is listening to a sound, and so and so and so. These are things that we know today. We're going to go very superficial because our topic is sufferings and afflictions. It's not neuroscience, but we're going to take two elements out of this to explain things. So here's an idea. You put this guy in and you give this guy a bar of chocolate, for example, chocolate bar. And you tell him, eat the chocolate bar while the brain is being scanned. So you go in and you scan and so and so and so and so, and he'll record that. 2 weeks, and you send him home. 2 weeks later, you tell him, come back. He comes back, he goes into the machine, and we tell, well, this time is going to be slightly different. We're not going to give you the chocolate bar. We want you to remember the day that you were here eating the chocolate bar 2 weeks ago. And we do the analysis, we do the capture again. You see, he's just remembering. He's not eating the chocolate bar. When you compare both, the activity is in the same areas with the same intensity. That's an unbelievable discovery by science. So what this means is that the brain does not know how to set apart reality from imagination and remembrance. The brain doesn't know if you remember the chocolate bar you ate 2 weeks ago or if you're eating it. That's interesting. So we start to get some interesting things here. If the brain doesn't know the difference on a physical event or the memory of an event, what happens, for example, when, let's say, 3 incarnations ago, I killed somebody, and 3 incarnations later, today, that somebody shows up in front of me? What is my feeling, my physical, organic feeling? It is the same on the day that I killed him. Probably a lot of adrenaline, a lot of lost emotions, a lot of things were going on for me to be able to kill that guy right here, shot and dead. So that same thing is happening to me right now. Not at a conscious level, but I'm going to say, I don't like that person. I don't feel well when that person approaches. Let me go to another spot. Let me go to the other side of the room because of this. So when we started studying neurosciences, we understood two things that are critical for us spiritists to understand that. This is one of them. The brain does not know. So organically, it's the same thing. That's why we feel bad when we see somebody that we have a bad history with in a previous life or in several previous lives. Another thing that neuroscience discusses, and because they discovered recently, is called neuroplasticity. That's easy to understand at a very, very basic level. For example, think of somebody, think of yourself, you broke your arm. Okay, so you broke your arm, you put the cast on, and you're going to stay with the cast for, let's say, 30 days. Okay, so here you are, everything is okay, and you walk and you're doing as much as you can. Of course, you're limited a little bit. On day 31, you take the cast off, and you go off the street like this. And everybody's looking at you. What is happening to that guy? What goes on your mind? On my mind, let's say it was me. What goes on my mind? I can't move this. I'm terrified. I'm terrified. What is this? The brain has some characteristic that was named neuroplasticity. Brain, right? Plasticity is the ability of changing. For example, if I ask you, what is the shape of the Publix bag? And you're going to say, well, depends on what you put in. If you put a watermelon, is one thing. If you put a box, is another thing. That's exactly what it is. The bag is plastic. It has the ability to change according to the content, to what you put inside. The brain does exactly the same thing. So the brain conditioned itself. I can't move my arm. On day 31, you can, but you have to retrain the brain. You have to override what the brain is telling you. The brain is telling you can't, but the brain is not the top ascendant of your life. The spirit is. So the mind, the spirit has to tell the brain, no, I can. And you go a little by little, 1 inch every day, and then you go to it. But we all go through this. Think of somebody that was not born deaf, but they became deaf in their lifetime. What happens to this person? They develop an amazing, unbeatable ability with their ears. They listen to things that we can't because they can't see. So what happens is, think about the brain as a volume of matter, okay? And the volume of matter is divided in parts. Academically, those are the parts, some of them in colors. Each one of these parts is responsible for another thing. So part of this volume, for example, this part here, has to do with identifying things that we see. Okay, this part here, it has to do with things that we hear. In the case of somebody that got deaf, not deaf, blind, I'm sorry, blind. Somebody who got blind, they can't see anymore. So this physical volume of matter is, quotes, useless. So what does the brain do? It adjusts, it uses this part for something else. And that something else is for the ears. So that's why they develop such a better ability of hearing compared to us. This is neuroplasticity. That's the ability that the brain has to change things around. Okay, what does it matter to us in sufferings and afflictions? Well, one thing that matters is we know that the mind, the spirit, okay, commands something, right? So we make choices. We make choices, so something's going to happen. This is going to go to the physical level where the brain is going to make it happen, and some dynamics is going to take place in the body. So let's say, for example, somebody starts talking to me. I don't like it, and it ends up that I hit him. So down here, the physical event, the dynamics is I just hit him. It all starts right here because I didn't like what he was saying, for example. What science tells us is for you to get from here all the way down here, okay, you have to place your attention on this thing. Attention is what makes this becomes a physical event. Sometimes you might be listening to, let's say you're watching TV and you're like, you're loving what you're watching. And then somebody's calling you here. And then you're like, let's say it's a game. When the game stops and ends, that person comes to you, you don't listen to me, I was calling you several times. Oh, you did? Because our attention is so strong on that we blocked everything out. That's the neuroplasticity of the brain. Now, science uses the word attention to make this, they use the word actually density of attention. That's how much your mind focuses on something that makes it happen on the physical plane. Density of attention. In Spiritism, we use a different word. We use willpower. That's what those spirits were saying. It's very easy to do. We just don't have willpower. That's what they were saying back on that question. So you see, science is saying the same thing that Allan Kardec and André Luiz and Emmanuel, they're saying. It's just that they are at the physical level now. They are proving this scientifically, that this is what it is. If I place my attention on making changes, I'm going to change. If I go like, that's really hard. It is really hard. Yeah, that's, wow, I don't know if I can do that one. Then I don't know if I can do that one. It is neuroplasticity, okay? So attention, density of attention, it's what makes the brain change. So then we got into a series of conclusions, just 4 of them, so we can take home. First of all, when we don't know what to do, instead of hitting somebody, stop. And we ask, what would Jesus do right here, right now? What would he do? Be the 1-minute Jesus right there. Things start to change. Just be the 1-minute Jesus. Now, Jesus is asking us to follow him. Don't ask him to follow you. We do that a lot. You see, us following Jesus is responsibility. Waiting for Jesus to follow me is victimization. I'm waiting for the Savior. I'm waiting for him to come after me. Number 3, the brain buys what the mind sells. The brain buys what the mind sells. If the mind says, I can't do it, then I can't do it. The mind says, wow, I'm going to make this change in my life. Then the brain says, yeah, let's make it together. The brain doesn't do anything else rather than following what the mind is telling it to do. And the last thing here, because of neuroplasticity, right? Think about suffering again. We are masters in suffering. We have suffered of all ways and all possibilities. We know it all. We know everything about it. We should have a diploma of suffering. With that diploma, we are entitled to teach people because we know so much about it. Okay? We can teach people how to suffer. But think about this. If I know it all about suffering, and neuroplasticity is a fact of life, why don't I use my suffering to make people not suffer? You see, if I take all the knowledge that I have about suffering and I go to my own corner here and I go like, wow, suffering is this and it's that, and tomorrow I don't know, and last week was a disaster. What am I doing with my neuroplasticity? I'm taking all my knowledge and I'm making it happen. Now, what if I take all this knowledge and I say, that guy needs help. He's suffering and I know what he's going through because I've been there. What if I place my attention, density of attention, what if I place my attention on his suffering? What happens to my suffering? I don't suffer. Density of attention, a fact of science. How do I stop my suffering? By helping those who are suffering, because I know what suffering is and I can place my density of attention towards them, not towards me. Thank you very much. Have a good night.